Good day, everybody. Welcome to the Deal Scout. On today's show, we're going to have a conversation with a fellow podcaster, Mr. Lane. Lane, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Josh. Aloha, everybody.
Hello there. So, all right, tell us a little bit about who you are and what kind of things are you up to right now?
So currently own 6,000 rental units under management. Mostly invest in stabilized apartments with a little bit of value add. But started investing back in 2009 as I was still working my engineering job. Up until that point, just followed that linear path that a lot of us are told to go down, which is study hard, be a good employee, invest in your 401k. And then I realized, how the wealthy do things very differently than what we're all taught by our parents, coworkers, friends, and family.
Yeah. How did you learn that lesson, right? So the world teaches you, or school teaches you, here's how to be wealthy. Go to school, get a job, become a professional engineer like you did, right? How did you learn the real way?
Yeah, so I just found a better way of doing it. I started to I was really good at saving my money. I was really frugal. And shortly after college, I saved up 80 grand to go buy my first house to live in Seattle. So saved up 80 grand to go buy a $350,000 house. I was working on the road all the time as a construction engineer, and I was never home. And I was in my early 20s, and I realized, well, that's kind of silly, right? They didn't have Turo or all that stuff back then, but I had that mindset of, well, if I'm not using it, might as well rent it out, make some money. So I started to rent it out, and that was kind of where I got this taste of cash flow. And I was like, wow, if I keep doing this a few more times, I'll be able to fire the boss eventually.
Yeah. So how did that go? At what point did you go, you know what, I'm done with a job, I'm done with this addiction to the paycheck, I'm out? When did that happen for you?
Yeah, I have a big I'm not a big risk taker. So it took me I didn't quit my job until about 2018-ish. So that was almost a decade later. I was in my engineering job for at least a dozen years, just doing that. Every year, when I was really young, in my early 20s, I was able to save maybe $100,000 a year for my paycheck. Um, After that, it was probably around 50 or $60,000 a year, but all that money was kept on going to investments. Just in the beginning, I would buy turnkey rental. So around 2015, I had 11 of those silly things. But I would say if you're under $250,000 net worth, to me, that's the way to get started. I mean, syndications aren't for you yet. But around that time period, I started to join different masterminds, get around other accredited investors, and start to realize, they were ditching their little single family homes behind and going into larger deals as an LP investor. And, more for the taxes and the legal benefits. And this is where I kind of uncovered the whole picture. You invest in large deals, you diversify, you use the passive losses to offset your income. And you also, you're more of a passive investor at that point. And, it's the more sustainable way of building wealth.
Yeah. Now, in the book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, they talk about that there's this time where your passive income can replace your active income, and that's when you initially get off the rat race. At what point was that for you? Like, when did that happen? What year or what stage in your business were you in?
It's hard to say. I mean, I know around 2015, I had 11 rentals and I had a few $1,000s of passive income a month. But I mean, I'm sure that could have made me financially free because I was pretty cheap. But like, 6,000, $10,000 a month is more what average people need, right? That's really when you start to hit that critical mass. And perhaps I got there maybe around 2017, like several years later. But about the same time, that's where I started to put together deals on my own, buy apartments on my own, and kind of put together more business. And that's eventually why I quit my day job. Started to advise other family offices and started my consulting business. And that's essentially what I realized. I made more revenue doing that than my engineering job. And that's what ultimately made me quit my job. Because all this time from 2010 to 2015, I was slowly doing less and less at my day job, right? I was working for more private, going from private Fortune 40 companies, going to less and less responsibility, more public sector cruise jobs. And a lot of that was just kind of slowly by design over time, because my ideal lifestyle was just going to invest passively and, keep going to this job every day. I'm going to see people, got to do something, right? So I was, you try and find like something you can deal with. Most people talk in terms of like, what will I do when I'm retired, right? But I always tell my folks like, well, figure out if you had to do something for the rest of your freaking life, what would that be? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. What would you do for your entire life? And do you feel like as you're talking to your, potential students or people out there in the world, if you're like, all right, take money off the table, what would you do just because you like doing it? Do you find most people have a hard time answering that question?
Yeah, I mean, for you go through maybe like two or three mental stages. The first stage is you don't really believe it, right? And that's where I was in my early 20s to mid 20s, where this whole passive cash flow thing, I mean, you have the analyzers, the spreadsheets, you build, engineers go ham on the whole projecting out in the future type of stuff with our graphs. I mean, it's possible, but until you start to see, several $1,000s of passive cash flow compile every single month like clockwork, you don't really start to unleash, like, it's not really, you don't really believe it. You're kind of skeptically optimistic. So for me, that happened pretty early. I realized, wow, this stuff works. I'm going to be able to quit my job well before I'm like my mid 30s, which I did. And then, I think most people go through this like floater stage where you're kind of like, oh, I'm going to go travel, right? I'm going to go, take pictures of my food and put it on Instagram and show everybody what a cool life I have. And then anybody who is somewhat self-reflective, that shit gets really old after a while, right? It's
Yeah.
kind of a really lame, shallow, basic existence. It's cool. I mean, I think everybody's got to go through that stage, right? And it's just kind of like, it's kind of like adult adolescence as you go through from scarcity mindset where you're just trying to pay your bills and then build a retirement, build a financial future. And you get to this point where you realize you're FI, you're free, you're zero G, you've hit this critical mass. And so for me, I got that in mindset a lot earlier than I actually had in terms of numbers, passive cash flow coming in. So I was starting to kind of search like, all right, well, at some point this is going to work within the very near future. What the hell am I going to do prior to that? And that's where kind of like the podcast, I would teach people how to buy turnkey rentals initially and stuff like that, just because that was the path that I kind of started on initially. And I still think that's how people should get started when they're lower net worth. But, like I think like in terms of mindset, like once you pass that stage, most people take like 6 months. Some people take years to really kind of figure out, like they get out of that scarcity mindset. They put the oxygen mask on. They start to think about, all right, well, I'm not here to trade time for money. What can I create with this time? I mean, and you have none of your peers likely have this kind of mindset. They're all in the matrix, trading time for money all day long.
Yeah. So tell me how you quit your job. Did you flip tables and, disrupt things and ring a bell or, grab your cardboard box? Like, how'd you go about doing that?
Actually, I just put in my 2 week notice and I didn't tell anybody. Only people I knew were the managers because I didn't want to tell anybody because one of the rules I've developed is I don't screw around with people's paradigms. Like people over the age of 50 to 60, after a while, I mean, they start to, a lot of people don't like their jobs. After a while, in your 40s, some people, they start to develop this tricky mindset where they fool themselves into liking it and they feel like it's their passion. But millennials know that's just nonsense, right? Or it might just be a baby boomer thing.
Yeah.
And I don't, and after a while in your 60s or 70s, you probably develop this attitude that, yeah, you are very important to your workplace. And that was a big thing for you. So for some young kid like myself to come around and say, yeah, you did it all the wrong way. Like, you didn't have to do it that way. I just don't like the pop people's paradigms because I mean, I don't know, it make a guy go crazy, I would think, right?
Yeah.
Like if somebody just said, "Oh, you should have just bought a handful of rentals in your 20s, 30s, or 40s, and you didn't have to work for 5, 10 more years after that point once you've hit that trajectory." So
Yeah.
I don't pop people's paradigms. So I didn't want to do that to the coworkers. So yeah, and like I mean, you just think of the rumors, right, that come up after that. It's like, where did Lane go? Like, well, he supposedly he was like he had like a dozen or two rental properties, and he was just done. That people wouldn't understand that, I guess. I just thought it'd be better if they just thought I went AWOL and just went, crazy. Some people, people do that, right?
What happened to Lane? He went
Yeah,
nuts.
yeah, he just went off the deep end. I'd rather have be something like that because if not, they don't understand that. Oh, Lane went out of his comfort zone. He bought a rental when he was 22 years old, and then you know what? That son of a bitch saved more money, and he bought another 2 years later. And then he kept doing that same damn thing for 5, 6, 7 more years. And he had 11 rentals. And then he started to buy some apartments, like that. I think it is a direct reflection that people had access to this, but they chose not to do this at all steps of this timeline. So to answer your question, I mean, specifically, I mean, I just, um, my manager knew I was going to leave, but we didn't tell anybody. And then just one Friday, I just came in late, like at 10 o'clock. And then, because I was going to stay late and then clear out all my stuff, I just took all my stuff and just pieced out and left. And that's it.
Just,
And it's funny.
yeah.
I mean, like for people who are still working the day job, I think like maybe half of your mental bandwidth is spent thinking like office politics and this person works for this person, that person doesn't really like that person. Once you quit your day job, all that garbage is just totally like useless knowledge you've learned,
Yeah.
you know? Like and like even technical stuff, right? Like I used to, build railroad. That was my first job. Like the angle of the switch and what's the left hand frog and all that type of like technical stuff. Um, just I don't use any of that stuff today, right? There's so much stuff that we spend so much time and effort to learn. Yet it's totally not. It's not applicable to anything. In once you wake up and it's real life.
What kind of price tag did it take to get the P.E. after your name?
So that's a professional engineering license. It's kind of hard to get. I mean, I don't honest. I mean, I actually know why I got it because one of my jobs, as I was trying to get more of a government job, they require that PE license, which is stupid, in my opinion, because like it's just a bureaucracy type of thing. Supposedly it designates it's supposed to like separate the good engineers from the ones that like can't take tests. Apparently, it's pretty hard. It's hell of a lot harder than a real estate life insurance license. It's probably on par with a CPA type of license. I don't know. I don't know if it's like a doctorate or anything like that. I mean, doctors, you got to go to a lot more school and rigmarole. But as far as a test, it's pretty hard. I mean, engineers will put suitcase books in their suitcase, stuff like that. I don't know. I studied hard for a couple of weeks, took a week off work, and but yeah, never don't use any of that stuff today. Like I just put it behind my names because
Yeah.
it's like, damn it, I spent so much time and effort on that silly thing, right? Like just like I got like a master's degree too that I did from like University of Washington, which I think, I mean, some of these online degrees are kind of a joke because it's just a way to get money from like international kids who just have too much damn money. And like my employer paid for my master's education. So like, I mean, it's just dumb employers that are willing to spend actually 20, 30 grand to keep good employees around. What I say, like I didn't even use really use it. It's just nonsense.
Yeah. So you were working with government in the government, and you wanted a specific job, so you had to get extra education, and so you went through this whole process, became a PE, and like, what age was this? Let's have a fun chat.
I think that was in my like mid-20s.
Okay.
Yeah.
You and I get to go back in time, and we're sitting there, and you're just getting ready to sign the dotted line to, go through the process of becoming a PE, right? You could give yourself one piece of advice right when you're about to sign. What piece of advice would you give yourself?
I mean, I think everything I did was all part of the process, right? Like, I'm not a house flipper, I'm not a wholesaler. Everything I did required money, and all this education that I did, these jobs I didn't like. I mean, at the end of the day, it put money in the bank for me, so I could put into investments. So I don't regret any of it, I guess, is what I'm saying. Sure, it was unnecessary, but it was a way to trade time for money at a higher multiple.
Yeah.
And today, we'll develop properties, and a lot of the stuff that I did at work, managing consultants, contractors, construction management companies, is what I use today, strangely enough. So I guess my industry, there was some like carryover to what I did today, but a lot of the things I think prepare you for the next step, right? I mean, like a lot of like my first company I worked for was very high stress. Had to manage like crews out in the field. I mean, a lot of like the leadership skills that I learned there were very valuable. As far as the stupid academic stuff in the PE test, like none of that really carried over. But the fact that you had to buckle down, you got built confidence and that type of stuff, you know.
Yeah. All right. So
Yeah.
you might not have told yourself, hey, don't do this and don't sign and become this because it was part of the process. You had to trade time and, time for dollars for a little bit of time. But what advice would you give yourself then, based on what you know now about people, about life, about belief systems, whatever it is? What piece of advice would you give your younger self?
I mean, I'd probably say, look, man, I mean, the traditional path is for suckers, right? I mean, like you're obviously not a good engineer. Just do exactly what you're already doing. Save a bunch of money, even in fact, save even more money so you can get the hell out of this rat race quicker. And keep doing what you're doing. I think the only mistakes I made initially was like very early on, I paid off debt a little bit faster. I did like a 15-year mortgage. If I wish I would have remembered myself signing that dotted line for that refinance, I would have slapped myself and said, no, man, just do a 30-year mortgage, strip out all the equity and go buy 2 more rentals with that money. Don't pay it down faster. It's silly.
Now that doesn't follow the Dave Ramsey plan. So, Dave Ramsey plan is debt snowballs and get out of debt as fast as possible
Yeah.
for freedom. You're kind of saying, hey, actually I would have held on the 30 years, stripped out the equity and, did 2 more.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Dave Ramsey, the Susan Ormans, they cater towards the masses, right? 99% of people out there are really bad with their money. They spend more than they make or they don't make any money. Most of the people I work with, they make a $60,000 plus professional wage. So most of them multiple 6 figures, and they're good with their money, right? These are the kids who maxed out their 401ks in their 20s, right? But most people aren't like that. Um, for people like that who have good financial habits from the get go, because that's all they were taught. I mean, you go buy rental properties, you acquire a lot of good debt. But for most of the people in America, they need people like Dave Ramsey, Susan Orman to tell them to go do this other stuff. I mean, just like buying a house to live in. I don't think people who are financially sophisticated should buy houses to live in. You barely make money with the pace of inflation doing that, where you can probably grow your money 3 or 4 times as fast if you invested in passive real estate, cash flowing properties. But I still think most people should buy a house because they suck at money management, and the house is a forced piggy bank for them. So we're talking different paradigms here, right? I mean, it's just same thing. I talk to like younger guys who are still good with their money. Go buy a turnkey rental, get started, right? But for accredited investors and above, that's where the bigger deals come into play. Not you don't tell a little kid the same advice as a grown adult, right? And just because somebody looks like an adult still means there's a boy in man's body.
Yeah, I sometimes am that boy in a man's body. I have to tell myself, don't eat too much, don't drink too much. So I am not the typical super disciplined, structured person, right? So I'm on the flip side of that a little bit. Now, you said this, early on in our conversation, is you're very frugal, right? And you're very good with your money. Like, where did that come from? Why are you frugal and good with your money, and other counterparts maybe aren't? Like, where did you get that from?
I mean, my parents are pretty like frugal to begin with. We grew up in Hawaii where, things are a lot more expensive here. Pay isn't that good. Maybe it's just a straight up just Asian thing, right? Which is super cheap. We're the ones who like the family who brings in their like sandwiches into Disneyland, like, or like we never ordered soft drinks when we went to a restaurant. Like I didn't realize until I went to college and all my friends were buying like sodas and stuff like that. And I'm like, dude, I just don't do that, like just, this is, parents are like, you order freaking water, self-serve, like,
Yeah.
um,
Now
yeah,
you're
I was
doing
always good at money.
yeah, you're doing pretty well for yourself now, and you run clubs and you teach family offices and you work with a bunch of investors and stuff. Are you still pretty frugal?
Yeah, I'm a recovering frugal person. On my website, I've got like a long list of like kind of things I'm sort of shameful, but that's where I came from. Simplepassivecashflow.com/cheapo is that list. Like it's a bunch of like really like I don't know, like mod pizza.
No,
You've heard
what's
of
that?
that? Well, it's basically like these make your own pizza joints these days are pretty popular, but you can load up on like little secret is you can load up on the salad and just put all the fixins on it for the same price. Like there's like those are the things that I would do, but now I'm conscious of it. And I know like this is where you got to move from scarcity mindset to abundance mindset because when you go to abundance, now you empower other people, you add value to other people. And that's really how you grow wealth, right? You solve other people's problems. But people in scarcity mode, they're still worried about, what are they going to do with their money? How do we save it, right? Which is cool to get yourself up to a certain point. And I'd argue $500,000 net worth. That's a great operating system to have it. But once you get above that point, you've got to grow your network. You've got to kind of spend money to make money. And that operating system doesn't really work. So I've been kind of conscious over the years to knock that stuff off and, enjoy life a little bit and find things that spend my money on value, right? And value is sort of a conceptual idea.
Yeah. Well, what do you value? All right, so time. You could take time off the table. What other things do you value?
Um, the quality things I um, that I aspire to that were important to me at one time that I don't have to buy again. Um, I mean experiences too, right? I think it's all the stuff we haven't heard before. Um, but yeah, I guess that the price is the price you pay, but the value is the utility that you get.
Hmm. Now, I like hats, right? So, I've got a bunch of cool hats. What's your thing? Do you like watches or shoes or cars or, is there anything like materialistic that you're like, this is my one thing that I give myself permission to do?
I'll spend money on like tech stuff because or everything I do with like the podcasts and YouTube, you need a fast computer, and eventually, essentially that's time, right? What it
Yeah.
comes down to. The quicker your computer loads, more time you get back. But I don't know, man. Like this is where I've struggled. Like I just don't. I just kind of like looked away from that type of stuff. Like kind of how like an alcoholic stays away from beer. It's just I know I've known so long that I gotta stay away from like these fancy things. But lately, I've been like, I like cars. I mean, I guess I kind of like cars. I've been into like um this. There's a cool course out there, exotic car hacks, that you can like get into like Ferraris, Lamborghinis, that Porsches for like almost for free, or you could make money doing this stuff. Because I guess like the prices of like exotic cars, they skydive in the first several years. But a sort of a strange phenomenon is they kind of come up in price after the year 4, 5, 6 if you buy the right model and right make. Um, so for me, it's like these inconsistent as an entrepreneur, right? You get a huge hard on with this stuff, right? Inconsistencies, loopholes, way to hack the kind of the market, the way the market
Yeah.
is. I
Yeah.
mean, and it's something where it's like, who doesn't like cars? I mean, well, I didn't like cars initially, but then I got into like nice cars and then get into it, right?
Got it. Got it. All right. So I like hats. You like Ferraris.
Well, I don't have a Ferrari yet, but like but that's the fun part. Like you gotta start off with like your high end luxury, then you get into this next one because it's all like there's a game to
It's a
this, right?
game. It
It's
is.
it's it's pretty much Japanese rice paddies with like cars essentially, right? Like there's a system you have to learn. You have to level up your lenders and get the next bigger hack each time and time again.
I'm not familiar. All right. So Japanese What is this? Japanese rice?
So there, I forgot where I heard this, but like, I mean, so people really like things that are a little bit of complicated and you can kind of build upon it, right? Like real estate investing is perfect, right? You go out there, you run out there, you buy a turnkey rental, you're off and rolling, right? But then you start to improve the systems and processes and your next deal finding ability, right? I mean, now we buy 400 unit apartments. We've kind of got a team and we got the SOPs for them. And it's kind of boring at this point, right? But it's still technical enough to keep me engaged. And the example that I forget which book this was, might have been Malcolm Gladwell, great author, but like they say, well, the something that's very similar in old school times is like Japanese rice paddies with the Japanese people, right? It's kind of a complex system of how you manage the water to go in and out, right? It's not like planting corn, I guess, right? It's kind of complicated.
Yeah.
And it's like something where like humans like this type of stuff where you can kind of geek out on this and solve puzzles in a way.
Yeah.
And they're not extremely hard puzzles, but it's just hard enough to keep you engaged and give that endorphin rush when you kind of hit certain milestones along the way.
So
It's
you like you like to
kind of like
hack the
playing.
system, right?
Yeah. I mean, just systems that are complicated enough. I mean, real estate's kind of simple at the end of the day. It's not rocket science, right? We're not trying to put a guy on the moon or Mars here.
Yeah. So you're gonna say it's kind of like a game, and you're gonna tell me the game. I
Yeah, I
interrupted you.
mean, like I've met a lot of like millennials and Gen Zers that are like, the same thing, Japanese rice patties, but for them it's like freaking Legend of Zelda. They probably should put their time and effort and brain power to something a little bit different. But the premise is the theory is the same, right? All these, why do you play Legend of Zelda? Well, Legend of Zelda, people haven't played it lately. It's just a bunch of freaking like 3D puzzles. It's not like the Legend of Zelda, Nintendo system anymore, right? Whereas more about the journey and all the storyline. Now it's just about puzzles,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. So now you're spending time with family offices, and like, what, tell us about what is a family office, and what you do with them or for them or being a part of them.
Yeah, so the term the family office comes from $100 million families and above. So if you think of like Batman had Alfred. So
Yeah.
exactly what Alfred does, minus all the gizmos and gadgets. And
Alfred was cool.
yeah, I mean, like once you reach a point, $4.5 million net worth, you should be able to not invest in real estate, just put the money into some annuity or something like that. And your 2, 3 kids should be able to live very comfortable lives. And yes, of course, they'll probably screw it up as 90% of wealth leaves families in 2 to 3 generations. But a family office is an informed advisor to make sure that that wealth does not dissipate, but it grows in what the family's values are, what businesses they value, or what problems they would like to solve for a long-term legacy in the world. So what I realize, there's not many people advising in the lower rungs of this space, right? I mean, because they can't afford a family office guy, right? They don't have $100 million. So, and this is where most of my clients are first generation wealth or immigrants. So the first person in their family that has surpassed $1 million net worth before the age of 50 or 60, right? That's kind of the criteria of, the average person. So very hard worker. They're not dicking around, right? They're not trust fund babies.
Yeah. So what, let's do a comparison, right? You said 90% of family wealth is dissipated second and third generation, right? That's crazy. Now let's compare a second or third generation mindset to a first generation wealth client.
Yeah, so the second generation wealth, I mean, it's not their fault, right? I think most people would call them nincompoops, but like their parents spent all this time to get up to build this wealth. And most people who build that wealth over time, like I said, they don't hit it until 50 or 60. They're not like myself and my clients who hit it in their 30s or 40s. And by that time, when normal people hit that wealth, that legacy changing wealth time, the kids are already past the age where they can influence behavior and influence value systems. So that's part of the whole thing, right? But the parents realize that they it's kind of a misguided thing in my opinion. Like they value education, so they send the kids to very high prestigious schools to become your typical high income earners, doctors, lawyers, engineers, things like that. Second generation makes a decent, a very extremely good living, right? I mean, I'm not a big fan of education, but education kind of assures you that you just don't fall off the map in terms of, you're going to be in the upper half or upper quarter of the wealth out there with the education. It's a very good way to trade time for your money.
Yeah.
But like, unfortunately, what happens with them is they will teach their kids in generation three the same only thing that they know, and they don't know anything about freaking money at that point. They just know to get a good job, and at that point, they already have this is where they're just buying their kids whatever because they have money, and then the grandkids, that third generation, they totally messed up. Right? You see where this is going, right?
Yeah.
Their parents are willing to pay for college and education for them and get it into these big, these high prestigious careers paths, but there's no drive, there's no need for it because their whole life, grandma and grandpa and mommy and daddy got them everything that they wanted to.
Mm. So, do you have kids or plan to have kids?
Yep, got kid.
Okay. So, what are you teaching your kid different based on what you're seeing with other family offices or other wealthy individuals? Like, what are you doing different with your kid?
I mean, my kids is very young. I think my strategy, and I'm just kind of talking my ass here. Like I don't know, right? It's gonna change a little bit of time, but I know I'll have a lot more bandwidth to dedicate to how to pass off this because I've already made my money. I don't have to be like most people and kind of come up for water in my 40s or 50s
Mm-hmm.
when the kid is already old, grown up, and not listening to me, and by the time they hit their 15th birthday. But I'm gonna probably teach them that, yeah, hey, you can go to college and you can go down this career path, but there are a lot of other ways you can make money. You can just go buy a handful of rentals and replace your salary doing that. And oh, by the way, you don't really have to worry about money, right? The safari is your kingdom here, right? You are lucky. You're part of the lucky sperm club. You can screw
Fastest
you.
swimmer, he won.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I mean, you're lucky enough to live in America, right? Let alone be in the top 1%. Um, but I think my expectation is that, if you don't show certain values and you're not going to be a good steward of this world, you're not getting jack, you know? You'll get a college education, you'll get a Honda Civic. That's about all you're going to get if you put in zero effort and if I don't see promise. If not, I'm just going to give all my money to the Humane Society or something like that.
Is
And
that where you
that's,
would give all your
I don't
money?
know. At
You
this
just
point,
pulled
yeah.
rank.
I mean, I just don't have any. I'm very optimistic that my children will be able to kind of run with the torch. But that's the expectation I think I'm going to set forth, because I know what it does to it. Just ruins the legacy. And I think a part of it is surrounded around family values. Like for me, it's like honor, doing the right things, don't do chicken shit kind of stuff, but how do I create a trust that only pays out money to them if they exhibit these other values, right?
What would you consider chicken shit? You said I don't want to do chicken shit stuff.
Like the values are the same values that we code in our business, right? Like we don't retrade. When we go into a deal, we work with our brokers and the seller in the right way, just as we would like to be treated. We don't retrade. We're not like one of those guys. It drives us crazy every time buyers do that to us. Just honor is another one, right? Like you have people that are in your inner circle and you stay loyal to them until you're proven otherwise. And if once somebody, you lose the trust with somebody, they're gone, right? I mean, that's a big thing.
Yeah.
Another one that I was thinking about lately was initiative, right? Taking initiative. It drives me crazy when my employees just sit on their butt, not doing anything. Take initiative, right? Your job is to help the business and the company. And the same thing with my kids. If they don't go out there and just at least go get a job, then you're not getting any of this money. And maybe the hard, tricky part is, well, how kind of initiatives do you create off of those things? So one off the top of my head that I've kind of been throwing around lately is, well, if I want to instill the value of initiative, well, maybe, you know, grandson or generation 4, 5, 6, you're not getting any money from this trust, this irrevocable trust, unless you make money, right? If you make 50 grand, you get 50 grand. Or I could be even like, I can be really annoying and be like, well, you're not getting, you can only get this multiplier if you create passive income. Yeah.
Right.
You make $50,000 of passive income through a K1 or whatever other mechanism that'll drive the trustee crazy to officiate this. You're not getting anything from the trust. You can exhibit ways to make passive income on your own. In my terms, you're not a good steward of wealth.
Yeah. All right. Let's have fun here. Let's do a hack right now. Let's create a hack because you like puzzles and you like hacks. Let's create a hack to like put into mind how we're going to get our kids, right? So that's the third generation, right? My kids. I think I did the numbers right. Okay. So what is a hack we could put into place to make sure our wealth gets passed down in a healthy way to our kids and their kids?
Well, I mean, when I was a construction supervisor and I had grown men and kids in men's bodies, you know, how do you create the behavior that you want? Well, you communicate your expectations, but you also put in penalties if they do not hit it. Some people are rewarded by the carrot. Some people are, you know, more influenced by the stick, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, you make schemes where you pay out money, and if not, well, you can't really hit them with a stick, but you cannot pay out anything.
Maybe take money away.
Yeah.
A deduction, a fee.
Right. So the hardest part is like, okay, what are those like initial measures or like activities that I want to start promoting or, you know, taking away, you know?
Yeah. What are you more motivated by, the carrot or the stick?
Initially, and I think this is the same for most people. Initially, it's always the stick,
Yeah.
right? The stick, people are motivated by pain on the lower rungs. This is why what I noticed, like when people come to my website and listen to podcasts, they're not cruising because they're in a good place. They search simple passive cash flow because something happened to them, somewhat painful, right? They got passed up for a promotion, they got fired, um, they went through a family change, right? They had another child and they realized that, oh shit, the money we have isn't going to work, right? This arrangement we have isn't going to work. We need to get some rental properties. So, but then, you know, humans are very resilient. So after about 3 to 6 months, if they don't take action, they just go back to the status quo and they've lost that pain. The stick has gone away.
Yeah.
Right. But what I noticed, if the tricky part is like bridging yourself over to something that pulls you, like the carrot, find out what the carrot is, because that's more long-term sustainable fuel, right? It's kind of like the difference between burning oil versus burning wind, solar, electricity, right? The fuel is better. The fuel gets you off your butt. The fuel explodes. But the long-term sustainable way is that long-term green energy, right? Something that pulls you to the future. Yeah. So for a lot of my clients, it's like, well, they want to get financially free first because they hate their job. Or they might like it, but they'd rather have more time with their family and have freedom, right? And then it's getting up to $4 or $5 million net worth. But after that, you know, most of them are good at that point, or they like we mentioned a lot earlier, right? Like you get to this point where you're kind of like good, you kind of just search and you travel a little bit, you have some fun. But then some people, what they do is they find that thing that they want to create more legacy. For myself, is creating simplepassivecashflow.com, right? Like I just got so pissed off with all these like BS guru real estate things, which stole people's money, essentially trick people who didn't have money in the first place, that shouldn't even been in the program, to pay for $20,000-$40,000 programs. I got pissed off and I was like, it's not that hard, you know, just buy a turnkey rental to get started, you know, and here's how accredited investors do things. And I just put it out there for free. And but then that was like kind of what my motivation, like, oh, I want to put this out there, right? Help other people that are good savers, right? Good with their money, but they're just been lied to by the dogma of financial mainstream Wall Street type of stuff. So that for me was like my carrot. That's what I guided towards. And that was my kind of motivation that took me to that next level.
So what does the next level look like for Lane?
I don't know, man. I mean, I'm good. You know, like I don't know. I mean, I'm making this as I go along, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just from an investing perspective, just keep buying properties at cash flow day one with a little bit of ability to bump the rents, rinse, wash, repeat, and just build a bigger platform and help out more people along the way. You know, and I think money's not everything, but money gives you more options. And when you get to 4 million, you start to see that. When you get to 10 million, you see that level. And when you get to like the next rung up, it just gives you more options, right? I mean, now you can handle other problems or find other carrots, as we were kind of mentioning.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. I'm just gonna make more money and keep increasing the score, and then figure out what else you want to do. I mean, I think you see this with all your top 10 Forbes richest people, right? They have sort of like the cheat codes to money and business, right? It's pretty much what problems do they want to solve out there, and what resonates with them that they want to back it.
Yeah. So there, in the song, more money, more problems, right? With that statement, is that true or false? Or have you experienced that true or false for you? More money's more problems.
Yeah, I mean, Notorious B.I.G. was kind of right on that, but I mean, more money means different problems. I'd rather have more money and have those kinds of problems, right? Money's not everything, but sure makes life a hell of a lot better, in my
Yeah.
opinion. And what's cool about money is you can trade. A lot of times you can throw money at problems and make them go away. But it's one thing you can't really do is trade time for money or money for time. The only way you can do that is buying a private jet, compressing travel time, stuff like that. But
Yeah.
when you get to the end of it, I think of course we're talking really like meta here, but like like money, like scope, schedule, budget, right? Construction projects, you can pay money. You can either have something cheap, fast, but you can't have all three, right?
Cheap,
You have,
fast, and good, right?
yeah, cheap, fast, and good. You can pay money to make it faster and make it better, but you're going to burn up money. So if you have unlimited money, I mean, in theory, you can get rid of those other two problems.
Yeah.
Now, most people are like, oh, hey, you can't, money doesn't do everything. It's like, well, yeah, if you don't have it, I guess that's the story you're going to tell yourself, right?
That's a Daniel Tosh joke. He says, money can't buy you happiness. Just kidding.
Right? Yeah. Right. It's kind of like, I don't like fancy cars. Yeah. Well, once you start to get fancy cars, you start to like them.
Yeah. They're fun to drive. They're nice to drive. So so we talk a little bit about, okay, fine. You're just going to keep on buying more properties and more properties and more properties and just keep, rinse, wash, repeat, right? Kind of thing. What is the number you have in your head for when, like you and I are hanging out 40 years from now, we're sitting in Hawaii. We just, finished a good set surfing and we're sitting there having a Mai Tai or something like that. And we're looking back. So 40 years from now, how old will you be in 40 years?
Ooh, I don't know, like 70 or something, like 75.
You got to be good with math. Come on, man. You're a
Yeah.
professional engineer. Okay. So 40 years in the future and we're sitting back. What's the dollar number that you think you want to hit?
I think personally I've kind of hit that number, but my stuff is a mess right now. I have to hire people. I have to get back time to kind of, so I don't have to do anything. That's my problem now.
Okay.
If I wanted to, I mean, like my ideal is like, I can do whatever I want. I don't have to work and I can travel and pay people to do like things that I don't want to do, or I can travel first class, for example, wherever I want. That's something I like to do. I like to watch YouTube videos on like the guys who go in the first class stuff. I don't know why that's fun to me, but like I have enough money to do that. I probably won't because I get really nervous whenever I start to look at the difference between, the discretionary difference between first class and like premium preferred plus or whatever. I probably should just do it and suck it up because time is money and I feel like crap the next day when I wake up to Texas. But like I'm there. It's just like I think I just need to we're on the process of kind of building more of this, that COO level of management within my company, and to kind of get to more of a time abundance in my head, right? Okay. Where it should spill over into, spending the more of this money, right? Because right now, because everything I look at is like, time is money. Money is time.
Yeah. What's your favorite show or movie?
I stay away from shows, like how a crack addict stays away from, Glow.
Yeah.
I know I know I should not watch that type of stuff. I mean, I remember in college when I would come back home to Hawaii, I would like binge. One time I binge watched How I Met Your Mother for like, I don't even know how many hours. And I'm looking back and I'm like, that was really stupid. It's kind of like, most alcoholics, there's always like one time where they're like, oh, I almost died, right? I woke up on the street,
You may have been the only, you've been the only guy in history who said you binge watched How I Met Your Mother and almost died. Compare them to an alcoholic.
Yeah. Well, I didn't almost die, but like I was like, man, that was a really bad use of my time. So I know I have like an addictive personality for that type of stuff, which is the same reason why I stay away from video games too. But I like movies because they end,
Yeah.
Like I go on Netflix and I'm like, oh, it's a multi-episode thing. No, we're not watching that stuff, like Mandalorian. No, we're not watching that, I need something that ends. But that's part of my scarcity mentality with time, right? Like,
yeah,
I should be able to let's just go ham on this series for a little bit. Yeah. But that comes down to like, some people are abstainers, some people are moderators. If you gave me a bar of chocolate, I'd eat the whole thing. Some people are able to have one piece.
I can't do it.
I don't know what that's all about,
Yeah. So if I get Oreos, I can not have Oreos, right? I could walk by the store and see a bag of Oreos. But the first Oreo that hits my lips, I'm eating a row. Are you the same?
That's my wife's thing right now is Oreos.
Oreos?
Yeah.
Yeah. Me and your wife have something in common. Yeah. Because I can't say stop. I just keep going. So like, yeah, that's how you are with a bar of chocolate.
Yeah, like food things, but also like the video games, and maybe I might be okay with video games, but like the TV shows, right, that people are into. Like I've never watched, what is it? Not Lord of the Rings. I don't know, the one where Game of Thrones, the one where like they have sex scenes every other episode supposedly or something like that. I never watched that. Walking of the Dead. No one. Not gonna get into that type of stuff.
Got it. All right, cool. So let me ask you this question as we're coming up to the end of our interview here. Where can people go to connect you? Follow what you're doing and maybe do a deal with you.
They can check out simplepassivecashflow.com, and then if they're into podcasts, Simple Passive Cash Flow, passive real estate investing. In the beginning, it would talk a lot about buying turnkey rentals because that's what I was doing back in 2016. But as I became more of an accredited investor, it's more topics have kind of changed more towards, investing in apartments and passive investing and tax, legal, infinite banking, another thing that the wealthy do. Email address lane@simplepassivecashflow.com.
Got it. Yeah. Well, I'd like to hear maybe on the next episode, we'll chat more about, how the wealth manage their money and things that the wealth do that poor people don't do. So maybe that's a future conversation that we do. But Lane, thanks for connecting in. Ladies and gentlemen, listening into this podcast, I hope you learned a lot. I hope Lane has helped pop some paradigms in your mind about, passive income and about wealth and about generational wealth. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. As always, reach out to our guests, say thank you, and then find a way to do a deal together. Lane, thanks for coming on the show, and we'll talk to you all on the next episode. See you guys.